Epic quarterback duel in Knoxville. Diego Pavia, Joey Aguilar. Pavia has the upper hand.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcasting network in the industry. I'm your host, Corey Burton, with over a decade of coaching and sports media experience, bringing that to the table. And also joining me on this episode is Mike Huseman from Off Season After Dark. And what Mike and I are going to talk about is this one's going to be all about the Vols, man. We're going to talk about, can Vandy limit the Vols' big playability? We're going to talk about that. That's kind of what their identity is over there in Knoxville. How does Vanderbilt attack Tennessee's defense? But we're going to start where the bread is buttered. Diego Pavia versus Joey Aguilar. That's the story of the game here. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. But I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that this episode was brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the app today. Now, shout out to all the everydayers and everyone who makes this podcast your first listen, whether you're joining on the audio side or right here on YouTube. This is the Locked On Podcast Network covering your team every single day. Mike, we've got an epic quarterback duel here in Knoxville. Diego Pavia, Joey Aguilar. Now you've got a guy that's super efficient in Joey Aguilar, throws the RPO ball really, really well, can manage the game, and it's just very efficient in the quarterback in quarterback play. And Diego Pavia is just as dynamic as the next guy, and he makes big time throws, big time runs. I mean, he's just an electric playmaker. To me, when I look at this matchup, I think Pavia has the upper hand.
Absolutely. Aguilar does have more passing yards. It's about the only advantage he has if we look at it statistically. He's thrown less touchdowns. He's thrown more interceptions, which his ADOT is probably significantly higher. I mean, Tennessee is typically throwing the ball further downfield more, which will lead to more turnovers typically. But Pavia is a massive factor in the run game. Aguilar isn't. He is a good fit for that system, which, based on the timeline we had of them going in the portal after the spring ball was done and into the summer window, we figured they would get someone who fit the system. Heupel was most likely going to do that, and he did. He puts guys in positions to succeed. He's doing that with Aguilar, but I don't think anybody would say that Pavia has not been the better or more important player to this point in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just everything that he's done throughout the course of the season has proved that. The fact that he has developed this explosive aspect of Vanderbilt's offense where they are now a legitimate passing threat, which you couldn't say that at the beginning of the season. You couldn't even say that after the Missouri game. It's a part of their scheme that is just really like a rocket just launched right into orbit there, and now it's as big of a part of their offense as anything. And they've kind of shifted their identity a little bit. They still have that control element within their DNA, and they still want to control the game. But when it comes down to Pavia, like, he is so much better down the field. He's got so much better poise in the pocket. He's got better pocket awareness, pocket movement, and things like that. He's not pulling the ball down and running as quickly as he was all of last year and even into the beginning parts of this season.
Yeah, I think a lot of that just comes with maturity. He's more comfortable in the pocket and more apt to let the play develop than he was in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I know he's been working on all off season, just trying to shorten his delivery, trying to watch as much film as he can get his hands on, throwing with receivers, things like that. And the emergence of these guys, Tre Richardson had a monster game against Kentucky, 3 touchdowns, well over 100 yards receiving. Eli Stowers had a decent day, had a few big catches. Junior Sherrill had a nice day, over 100 yards as well. I mean, everybody's getting involved, and that's what's been the best thing to happen to this offense is they finally found some guys that have gotten involved and stepped up and become playmakers.
Yeah, both of these teams are throwing the ball well. I mean, and looking at the matchups, and we'll get into more numbers later, but both of these teams are top 15 in the country in passing. Vandy 15th, Tennessee's 4th in pass offense. They're both below 100 in pass defense. Tennessee 109th pass D, Vandy's 111. That leads me to believe we might see a lot of yards and touchdowns through the air on Saturday on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Joey Aguilar and what he did to this Oklahoma defense, I mean, and I remember watching that game, and I had to go back and watch the highlights because I didn't know, I couldn't remember exactly how it played out because I was back and forth between a couple of games during that evening, because I think that was the Sicko Bowl with Kentucky versus Auburn, so I got kind of glued into that one somehow. But when I looked at just kind of how Tennessee was moving the ball, I mean, they were ripping off big chunks. They were hitting RPOs. They were hitting passes around 8 to 10 yards a lot, and those guys were moving, and those guys were finding space. So like that's something that I think Aguilar does extremely well. He's very patient on the RPO, and he delivers a good quick ball to wherever it needs to go, and he gives his guys a chance to run in space. That's what makes him dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that they utilize space as good as anybody. That's the big thing with the Heupel offense. You're basically reading pre-snap and counting guys, and you're determining which half of the field you're going to throw to. Then you're reading a guy at the snap to determine likely where the ball is going to go, and they're very good at it.
Yeah, it's very quarterback friendly, and if you have a guy that can really see the field and really have great anticipation, like Hendon Hooker was really good at this. Joe Milton could just rifle a ball into space. He didn't need much space. He had a strong enough arm where space didn't matter. And then
he could flick the wrist and go 50 yards with it.
Yeah, just on a bullet, and before anybody could react, it was boom, knocking his receivers over. And so that's kind of the thing that for Josh Heupel to see him kind of bring in the RPO aspect of it, I think that shows you where Joey Aguilar's intelligence lies, and shows you kind of where this Vanderbilt defense, which we'll talk about later, what they have to really have to defend against. And for Joey Aguilar, where I think that he is going to, where I think he's going to be great in this game, and this game has all the makings of a shootout, is that efficiency in getting the ball into those spaces, is that really good ability to read defenders, read conflict defenders in the RPO game too.
And them incorporating more RPO this year, which they hadn't in the past, tells me a lot about Heupel and his ability to adapt and play to the strengths of his QB. They weren't doing it with Nico last year. They presumably weren't doing it in the spring with him. Aguilar comes in, he saw what he did at Appalachian State last year and thought, this will be something we can get yards on, and we can move the ball down, move the chains. So they did it. And I have a lot of respect for Heupel for doing that.
Yeah, so Josh Heupel, he realized, like, hey, I had a really good running game last year, and I have some really talented running backs, but like they're not Dylan Sampson. So what can we do to take advantage of these backs and create space for them? Well, let's just, and with Joey Aguilar coming in, you're like, okay, well, he comes from an RPO offense. We have some backs that need some space. I mean, it just seemed like a seamless transition. And if there's Tennessee fans out there that are upset with Josh Heupel, I don't know what to tell you. But going back to Diego Pavia, like where I think the advantage lies here is the fact that they can have that control element of it, and he can control the tempo. Like if they want to go, they did this against Kentucky. And I really noticed it more so against Kentucky than any team, where they changed speeds throughout the course of the game, and even in the middle of a series, they decided to ramp up the speed a little bit. They went fast. I think it was There was one series, it was like the third or fourth series. Okay. They started off, they completed like a 10-yard pass, and then they went fast for the rest of the series, and they hit a big play.
And that messes with defenses a bit because you can make it tougher for them to make calls. They're not used to having to move so quick, and you can mess with that communication, get big plays.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you have two quarterbacks that are this good, I think those little nuances, like being able to control the tempo, I think can give a team the upper hand because, Tennessee is really just one speed. They're not like super lightning like they were with Hendon Hooker. They're a little bit slower now. They're a little bit. I don't want to say methodical because they're not really methodical either. They're still relying on the big play, but like they move with a sense of urgency. But it's not like breakneck speed where you're going to leave your defense hanging. But with Diego Pavia, they still have that. They have an explosive passing game now with that element of, hey, if we need to slow this thing down and control, we can slow this thing down and control. Their first series ate up, I think, 10 minutes of clock against Kentucky, and they put it across the goal line. Like those things are momentum killers. Those things are they just zap the energy right out of the game. So on that note, we're going to answer the question, how does Vandy attack this defense? 109th in pass defense is Tennessee's defense. How are they going to attack it? We're going to tell you, and we're going to do that next. First, I want to talk to you about FanDuel. Mike, I don't know if you're an NBA fan, but I mean, this week and weekend is going to be primetime betting for any sport that you want. NBA, NFL, college football, all of that. And might as well do this all on FanDuel because this is the official sports betting partner of the NBA as well as other sports. So if you missed the start of a game or want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets from everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets in the same game parlays for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. I'm going to put money on the Detroit Lions because Thanksgiving Lions is always a good bet.
It is. And they're at home. They're playing well. They're a team that scored a ton of points. I mean, I was going against Jahmyr Gibson fantasy, and he had 55 fantasy points for the Lions. So that was a tough one.
Yeah, those 2+ touchdown bets that you had with Jahmyr Gibbs, you're probably walking away pretty satisfied. Yeah. But FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen. Thanks for making Locked On #1 in the industry. And if you need a second listen on the network, Locked On SEC is the place to go with Chris Gordy. If you need one outside of the network, Off Season After Dark, there's not really many other places to go. So go to Off Season After Dark because Mike's killing it over there, man. What are you doing on off season?
Wednesday morning this week, we're going to have a Kansas State guy come on. So they started poorly, got better, then really blew it against Utah this last weekend in a game which would have helped Vandy a ton if K-State could have held on, but they blew a multi-score lead, lost 51-46, and that could hamper the Commodores' bid for the playoffs because of Utah.
Yeah, I know, and we're going to talk about that in a later episode, Mike. But I want to know how does Vandy attack this Tennessee defense? To me, it's you have the 109th ranked pass defense. You have Vanderbilt, who is 9th in total offense. They're scoring 38 points per game, 458 yards per
15th
game.
15th of the country in pass offense, 51 in run offense.
Yeah, which is ironic because those numbers were flipped at the beginning of the year. So they're dynamic down the field. They have found a new identity. Well, not a brand new identity, but they've found a new avenue to score points. Does that keep rolling this weekend?
I would be surprised if this is a low-scoring game. I think both teams have a good scoring output this game. And I think for Vandy, we look at the numbers, and Tennessee's better at run D, and conversely, Vandy's better at throwing the ball. I think you still have to stay balanced if you're Vandy. You don't need to get away from who you are. You're still going to run to set up play action, motions, get advantages in the run game. Certainly you're going to throw the ball, but I don't think you change your identity just for this game based on, and I've said this all year on the group show, Tennessee's D isn't great. Anybody decent's going to move the ball and score on them. I think Vandy will do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, John Mateer had just a note on Tennessee's rush defense and how it compares. I think the closest comparison when you talk about quarterback stylistically is when they played Oklahoma and John Mateer. John Mateer, 19 of 29, 159 yards and an interception. And part of that was I don't think he was still fully recovered. He may have been fully recovered physically, but mentally he just wasn't. But he did run the ball 16 times for 80 yards, and he scored one on the ground. So to me, that has to lend itself to think that, hey, Diego Pavia could get loose on the ground a little bit as well. And obviously making huge plays in the passing game. And, to me, it's just going to be, there's going to be some option stuff there. I think they're going to be dynamic because they did a lot of unique things against Kentucky. They kind of went back to their roots while adding this downfield passing stuff. Like they did some end arounds. They did some motions where they would orbit return and flare the guy out and throw some quick screens. They still set up the run, which they didn't have a great day running the ball, and I don't love that. But they did enough to keep Kentucky.
They did
kind of at bay to where their DBs kind of had to cover, and Kentucky surprisingly went a lot of cover zero, and it was something I was like, they're really. And then Tre Richardson got loose a couple times, and they're like, well, he has no safety help over the top. Like this is gonna get bad. So I don't know how Kentucky plays. Kentucky. I know how Kentucky played, not very well. I don't know how Tennessee comes out coverage-wise against them. Do they do a lot of zone, try to keep everything in front and force Vanderbilt to drive?
They typically have been a man team, so I'll be curious because they're typically aggressive with their front seven, and you're leaving your corners on islands. We'll see if that changes this week.
Yeah, if they've been doing that all year long, I don't see them dramatically shifting their schemes.
No.
They might. Now, Vanderbilt's been able to get teams out of doing their, fancier blitzes or their exotic blitzes. They've had teams more in their base packages, base coverage packages, base pressure packages, more so this season because of what they're able to do from a formation standpoint, what they're able to do in the option game, and some of the downfield passing stuff that they've added. Like teams are just struggling right now to kind of figure out and get a beat on what Vanderbilt could do because teams had this idea of who Diego Pavia was, and now he's a Heisman frontrunner that can launch the ball down the field with great accuracy and make some NFL caliber throws. That's kind of where this offense stands, and I don't see them being any less aggressive this week against Tennessee because they're going to try to throw darts because they know what type of game this is, and they've been kind of preparing for what type of game this is, which is going to be an outright shootout.
And Pavia could get big plays in the run game if Tennessee blitzes and doesn't get to him. If your DBs are back in man, they're bailing, and your front seven is going to be aggressive, you better get there and you better make plays because if you whiff on him or let him get loose, that's where he has significant plays in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
And we know he can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of where Tennessee's kind of in a catch-22 here. Their linebackers are going to have to be really disciplined. They're going to have to tackle well in space, which it's hard to tackle Diego Pavia in space.
Yep.
And they just gotta get home, and they've gotta, for Diego, he's been very mature, very calm. Like I think that Alabama game kind of set him back down to earth enough to where he hasn't tried to play hero ball since. Like he's really just stayed within the framework of the game, and he's just made plays left and right. I know he struggled a little bit against Texas in the first 3 quarters, but he kind of found something, and then they just were able to exploit it. They just ran out of time. I think if there was 2 more minutes left on that clock, they probably would have won. But they, and ever since from the 4th quarter of the Texas game on, they've been electric on offense. So Junior Sherrill, I think, is going to be a big part of the game plan. Obviously, they're going to try to work the ball to Eli Stowers, and teams have been doing a good job taking him away for the most part. But they're going to work some things over the middle with him. They're going to run some crossing route stuff. They're going to try to find a mismatch there, especially if Tennessee wants to sit in man. Tre Richardson, I think, is going to have another chance to have a big game. They're going to send him over the top a little bit. They're going to put him on some jet sweep stuff, and he's really kind of like a utility guy where he can do a bunch.
He can do a lot. He's an impressive player that they utilize him well. I feel like they're doing with all their guys. I mean, it seems like, and this might be something that just comes with experience by nature, but Pavia, Stowers, Sherrill, Richardson, the O-line on the whole, they know exactly who they are and how to utilize their guys to create mismatches to the defense they're playing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. And that's just what they do. That's how they roll. And that just is something that, and this offensive line is a Joe Moore Award semifinalist and making a significant push. Like, if their quarterback can be in the Heisman contention, there's no reason why this offensive line shouldn't get rewarded for that and winning that Joe Moore Award. Now, I know Notre Dame's offensive line has to be in consideration with Jeremiah Love, but this is an offensive line group that's taken a lot of pride in making sure Pavia stays clean and making sure they have significant run lanes. And the reason why they're 9-2 for the first time since SEC started playing, they're 9-2 in the regular season. The only 9-win seasons they've had have included bowl victories, which they've won 9 games to this point. And that's impressive. If they win on Saturday, this will be the first time ever they've gotten to 10 wins. So there's that.
Yep.
And God forbid if they go 11-2, like if they don't make the playoff and they win their bowl game, they go 11-2, best season in program history by far. So, and that'll be something that we can use as a launching pad for the offseason because we know they're going after a 5-star quarterback. So, but Tennessee can hit their fair share of big plays and big shot plays, and they can move the ball in chunks as well. We're going to talk about that. How does Vandy limit that? Next. All right, we are wrapping up here. Locked On Vandy on the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Thank you for making this part of your day. Thank you for making this network number one. It's because of you. At Locked On Vandy is the place to go if you want to follow along. At Huseman CFB if you want to follow Mike and his show Off Season After Dark. You can find that as well on X. And Mike, as we wrap this episode, man, we talk about Vanderbilt and then being explosive and then finding this explosive element and then it's just been a season full of discoveries for this Vanderbilt team.
Yep.
For Tennessee, they've kind of had this identity all along. And from game one, we saw it. And from the first conference game against Georgia, we saw it. That ended up in a loss, but we saw it. Now, how can Vandy limit the Tennessee's big playability?
I think you have to be cautious to some extent. You have to be willing to give up the underneath, make Tennessee have complete drives on you, make them earn every yard you're giving them. You can't let them get those deep shots up the seam that they love to do. You have to make them be methodical. And like you had said before, they're not methodical. They look for those chunk plays, take those away, make them get 4 or 5 yards a pop, and hope you can get neutralize them, get plays for no gain, create turnovers, make them punt.
And to me, when I look at Tennessee play offense, they remind me a lot of Texas, except with a better quarterback, with a more efficient quarterback, with a quarterback that gets the ball out quicker than Arch Manning. Arch Manning's still finding his way a little bit. But with Tennessee, they still want to get the ball going into space. They still want to get it out there quick. And for what they tried to do against Texas, I think when you play a team like Texas, when you play a team like Tennessee with that style of offense, you have to. It's one of those precarious situations. There's a thin line here of like giving too much cushion to where when you come up to tackle, you're in a bad position because there's just too much space there. And then if you give up too much space, those guys are talented enough to get around you and go down the field. So you have to kind of find that happy medium to where you can still make a play in space, because there's going to be a lot of scenarios where you have to defeat a block and go make a tackle on a receiver, or he's going to go 10, 20 yards down the field before anybody else is anywhere near him. Because Josh Heupel, one thing he does really well is he uses every blade of grass on the field. And that's what in watching his offenses, that's what I really like about what he does. Unfortunately, he wears orange, but it's the style of attack it's evolved a little bit, and he's shown that he's able to adapt to whoever he has at quarterback. Like Hendon Hooker was that blitzkrieg, just rifle, hit slant, speed out, and then hit a go ball when the defense is in a blender. Like, he was really good at that. Joe Milton could just throw his way out of anything, so it didn't matter what you did.
And then Nico was kind of a hybrid between the two.
Yeah, Nico was kind of a hybrid between the two, but Nico really, and Josh Heupel, it was the first time he's really had to adjust too with Nico, and they struggled a little bit. And now he's found a guy that is mature, smart, heady. So what Vandy's going to have to do is 4 and 5 man pressures are going to have to get home. They're going to have to win some one-on-one battles up front. They're going to have to disrupt throwing lanes. One thing I saw that Oklahoma did a really good job of in the RPO game is with their edge guys, they attack the mesh. And they got a scoop and score out of this because they attack the mesh, because Aguilar he's so deliberate in riding the mesh that edge guy got there. And he didn't take the quarterback. He didn't take the running back. He just blew up the mesh point and was able to get that ball loose, and he was able to scoop it and score. And it's things like that and that really kind of put Tennessee back on their heels, to where it seemed like anytime they were about to get control of the game, they never really had it. And then Oklahoma would get control of the game for a minute, and then they would give it back. And it was just this back and forth of no team really had true control of that game. But that's one thing they did really well against the RPO.
And getting after the quarterback and creating havoc in the backfield is Oklahoma's strength. They are the best team in the country at it. Yeah. So that was one way they took advantage of it. And it's an area hopefully Vandy can take advantage of it too.
Yeah, I mean, they're a team that kind of got back on track with Kentucky, and Kentucky. They did. Kentucky was not the same Kentucky team coming into this game. I mean, Cutter Boley was as hot as any quarterback, and
he was playing well.
I mean, he was kind of in a groove. He was in a rhythm, and the play callers were in a rhythm. Eddie Grant, I think, is the play caller. He was in a rhythm. Yep. Their team was playing extremely well, and they got smacked back down to earth by Vanderbilt, which is still really odd to say. But this defensive front, they took that personally. The linebackers, especially Longwell, played a phenomenal game against Kentucky. It just seemed like the calls in that game were perfect at the right opportunity. And I think they can get a little bit of that as well. And I think they can do a little bit of baiting in terms of getting Aguilar to pull and throw and have a guy rob on like a seam RPO or like a glance RPO where the safety comes down, or they move some coverages, or they show some simulated pressure to where he gets a false key and maybe can steal a turnover or something like that. They're just going to have to play aggressive. They're going to have to play smart. And if they're going to play that way, they're going to have to tackle well in space.
And they've thrown 10 interceptions. That's almost won a game, not quite, but they're 91st in interceptions thrown. I mean, that means you're throwing more than most teams. Vandy has only thrown 6. That's 25th in the country. I mean, that turnover margin in a game that could be as high scoring as we expect it to be. Any possession you don't score could be the difference in winning and losing. So hopefully you can create, some turnover. You get Aguilar to throw you one, which he's done, and then you got to capitalize on it.
Yeah, get a fumble, get something, get a misread on an RPO, get a bad mesh, get a something. Catch him in a blitz in the right situation. Yeah. Maybe get a play in special teams. That's going to be just kind of what they do. Constrict the space enough to where it's tight when he's trying to make those throws, but not in a position where you're up in their face and you get burnt, things like that. So it's just got to be that balance. And so, Mike, I appreciate you coming on board. This is going to be a fun game nonetheless. Yep. This is going to be a high scoring. I think it's going to be a shootout. Give me a quick score prediction.
38-34 Commodores.
38-34 Commodores. Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of right there. I was going to say slightly lower scoring, like 34-28, 34-31, kind of that range, but 38-34 seems like a good score. Maybe even.
And what were the scores we're saying? Those are right there in, we have a 65.5 is the over-under. We're right in that realm with what we're saying. Yeah. So,
I mean, I'd be inclined to take the over. That's a big over, but I think I would take it. Yeah. Because it's going to be up there scoring wise. So, Mike, it was great to have you again this week. And, hey, we may get you again this week. It's Thanksgiving. It's a special week. It might be another twofer, so stay tuned for that. Mike Huseman, going to try to talk you into it. Going to try to twist your arm. Come on for another episode, maybe, and we'll talk soon. But until then,
I might be persuaded. Yep.
Okay, anchor down.